9-bit.
Gaming with Sophistication presents What are indie games? There's a good chance you've heard of indie games. Games like the first-person blockbuster Minecraft or the controller-smashingly difficult Super Meat Boy. There's a lot of great indie games out there, but what makes these games different from the likes of Mario and others? If you want to know what makes indie games different from other games, it's as easy as looking at a pair of words. Indie games. Let's focus on the first one, indie. According to Wiktionary, indie is a shortened form of independent, and is defined as any form of popular culture, such as pop music from a group not signed to a major label, from outside the mainstream. Indie games, then, are independently produced video games made without the help of a big studio, typically by small teams or even individuals. Perhaps individuals? As to what constitutes a game can be a little bit messy at times. Is Dear Esther a game or an interactive poem? That's up for debate. What we do know now is what exactly these games are. So what makes them a big deal? Because independent developers aren't backed by huge companies, they often take much bigger risks and tend to innovate more than other developers. This isn't to say that all indie games are creative or that no games from bigger developers are innovative. It's just that on account of their circumstances, games by indie devs are typically marked by a certain creativity and joie de vivre that sets them aside from the competition. As of late, this has created a movement that large companies cannot follow. While indie devs certainly face risks, failure for an indie is much different than failure for a large studio. If an indie developer spends 3 months creating a game that sells a few thousand copies, it could be considered a success, whereas a game developed by thousands of people that only sells a few thousand copies could be considered a catastrophe. What kind of innovation has the freedom to create any game brought about? The game that comes immediately to most minds is Minecraft. It started as a one-man project and quickly grew into an international phenomenon. It's a game that allows you to live and build in a world made of cubes, and it doesn't feature multi-million-dollar graphics, it didn't have a tremendous ad campaign, and according to what was considered conventional wisdom at the time of Minecraft's creation, an open-world game made of massive cubes shouldn't be selling. The game's success has inspired a new generation of developers and has become one of the most influential and beloved games of all time. The freedom to create a game on any subject brings another brilliant indie to mind, To the Moon by Can Gao. Mr. Gao was inspired to create the game when his grandfather was in the hospital and near death. Though his grandfather survived, Mr. Gao was forced to think about life, death, and regrets, and decided to express his feelings through a game, and To the Moon was thus born. I'd much rather not spoil the story for you in case you haven't experienced it, but what I can tell you is that it's one of my favorite stories of all time. Though I'd heard good things about it, I was not expecting to experience such powerful emotions through such a simple game. It's extremely unique. It combines elements of 16-bit RPGs with strong storytelling and a few science fiction elements. To the Moon is a piece of art that I feel everybody needs to experience. To the Moon, for a large studio, would be a very risky endeavor. A game styled after decades-old RPGs that tells a serious story without any explosions? That's an easy sell for Hollywood, but far harder to market in the mainstream game industry. Thus, the indies. I could go on for countless ages about bold, unique games that cut the edge and innovate, but for the sake of time, I won't. What I will tell you, however, is that indie games, games unfettered by fears of marketability, are a force for good. This is not to say that a game made by a large studio isn't any good, or worth playing. There are creative games by big studios on shelves right now. That being said, the video game market is changing, and there's a large shift towards independent development. How things will turn out in the long run remains to be seen. For the time being, we can all revel in the veritable flood of imaginative new experiences.
you.